You people always think you're special just because you served. The flight attendant's words cut through the cabin like ice, her eyes locked with contempt on the black veteran's face. Every passenger froze as she shoved him back into his seat with such force that the overhead bins rattled. Malcolm Renee felt the sting of her hatred but didn't flinch. 2 tours in Afghanistan had taught him about real battles, and when to fight them. The bruise forming on his shoulder matched the one forming on his pride, but his expression remained stone-cold calm. Without a word, he pulled out his phone and dialed a single number. The flight attendant's smirk vanished as he quietly spoke into the receiver. "Yes, sir. Flight 482. It's happening again." Within minutes, the pilot's voice crackled through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to an onboard incident, we will be making an emergency landing." As the plane banked sharply downward, passengers whispered and stared. Who was this man? What kind of power did he possess that could ground an entire commercial airliner with just one call? The answer would change how America viewed its veterans forever. Subscribe to Real Life Stories now to witness the shocking aftermath, when dignity meets justice at 30,000 feet. As the plane began its descent, Malcolm Renee sat quietly, the phone still warm in his palm. Eyes from every row burned into his back. The woman in the red sweater beside him, Patricia, squeezed his arm gently. "Are you all right?" she whispered. Malcolm nodded once, his military discipline holding his rage in check. The bruise forming on his shoulder throbbed beneath his shirt, a physical reminder of what had just happened. Just hours earlier, Malcolm had woken before dawn in his Queens apartment. The morning light filtered through half-drawn blinds as he packed his carry-on. His fingers lingered on the pressed Marine uniform jacket, the one he'd worn to honor fallen comrades at last night's memorial service. The fabric held memories of desert sand, of brothers lost, of battles fought far from home. This trip to Dallas wasn't about war, though. As a veteran's mental health advocate, he was meeting with lawmakers about expanding support services. Too many soldiers came home to find the real battle had just begun. At JFK Airport, Malcolm navigated the morning chaos with practiced ease. Boarding pass in hand, he waited patiently in the crowded terminal as families with small children and premium passengers filed onto American Airlines Flight 482. "Now boarding, Group 3, the gate agent announced. Malcolm moved forward with others in his group, nodding a quiet thank you to the agent checking his pass. The narrow aisle of the plane buzzed with activity, passengers stuffing bags into overhead bins, flight attendants directing traffic, a baby crying somewhere in the back. Patricia smiled as he took his aisle seat beside her. "Thank you for your service," she said, noticing his uniform jacket. "My father was a soldier too." Their pleasant exchange was interrupted by a sharp voice several rows ahead. "Sir, that bag is too large. You'll need to check it at the gate." Malcolm glanced up to see a flight attendant, Sharon, according to her name tag, confronting another passenger. Her tone carried an edge that seemed excessive for the situation. Eventually, the passenger relented, handing over his bag. Little did Malcolm know, this was just the beginning. As the flight prepared for takeoff, Sharon walked through the cabin, checking seatbelts and overhead bins. When she reached Malcolm's row, she paused, eyeing the corner of his uniform jacket peeking out from the compartment above. "That needs to be fully secured," she snapped, watching as Malcolm stood to adjust it. Something in her gaze lingered a beat too long, contempt flashing across her features, before she moved on. A series of delays kept the aircraft at the gate, adding to the cabin's collective frustration. When the captain announced another half-hour wait, Sharon began premature beverage service to pacify passengers. "Water, please," Malcolm requested when she reached his row. "I take medication for an old combat wound and need to stay hydrated." Sharon's. Her expression hardened at the mention of combat. "You'll need to finish that before takeoff," she said curtly, practically dropping the cup in his hand. The tension only escalated from there. When Patricia accidentally spilled her ginger ale during a small lurch of the plane, Sharon's response was disproportionately harsh. "Just sit," she ordered the mortified older woman. When Malcolm offered to help clean up, Sharon turned on him. "No, you cannot. Please remain seated." Later, when Malcolm stood to adjust his falling phone charger during another delay, with the seatbelt sign off, Sharon appeared instantly at his side. "Sir, remain seated," she snapped. "We're about to taxi." "The seatbelt sign is off," Malcolm explained calmly. "I was just adjusting my carry-on." Sharon's nostrils flared. "I expect you to follow instructions when you're on my aircraft," she said, voice dripping with condescension. "Your uniform doesn't give you special privileges." The words hung in the air, sharp and unmistakable. Patricia gasped softly beside him. Other passengers exchanged glances. Malcolm kept his composure even as his mind processed what was happening. This wasn't just poor customer service. This was targeted. During turbulence an hour into the flight, the inevitable confrontation occurred. As the plane shuddered, Sharon stumbled slightly in the aisle. Malcolm instinctively reached out, concerned she might fall. "Don't touch me," she spat, regaining her balance. When cups tumbled from her tray, Malcolm again offered help. "No, you will not," her voice rose. "I don't need your help." As the plane jerked again, Sharon lurched sideways. What happened next stunned everyone who witnessed it. Rather than simply steadying herself, Sharon's arms swung out forcefully, shoving Malcolm's shoulder. Gasps erupted from nearby passengers. The impact sent Malcolm sideways in his seat, the force deliberate and unmistakable. "Ma'am, what are you doing?" Malcolm asked evenly, controlling the tremor in his voice. "You were in my way," she snapped, defiance replacing the momentary panic in her eyes. Patricia spoke up immediately. "He was just sitting there. You pushed him." Other passengers began to murmur in agreement. "That was messed up," someone whispered. "Is she crazy?" asked another. Malcolm rubbed his shoulder, mind calculating his next move. The military had taught him chain of command and protocol. This wasn't a battle to be fought with raised voices. He remembered his connections, powerful ones in security compliance for major airlines. When the seatbelt sign turned off, Jacob, another flight attendant, approached. "Sir, are you okay?" he asked quietly, eyes flicking to Malcolm's shoulder. "I'm fine physically," Malcolm replied. But that was unacceptable. Jacob looked remorseful. "I know. I'm sorry. I'll let the captain know." Once at cruising altitude, Malcolm accessed the in-flight Wi-Fi. He sent a message to Colonel Addison Ace Brooks, his former commanding officer, now working in airline security compliance. On Flight 482. Assaulted by flight attendant. Need intervention upon landing, possibly earlier if escalates. This is serious, Brooks responded immediately. What the hell? Are you safe? Updating airline security now. At the front of the plane, Sharon was speaking urgently with the pilot via interphone. Malcolm watched her gestures, defensive, agitated. His phone buzzed again. Airline HQ requesting immediate details. They might reroute. Within minutes, the captain's voice came over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're dealing with a minor incident on board. Please remain seated and follow crew instructions." The passengers exchanged glances. "Minor incident," someone scoffed. "She assaulted him." Soon after, the plane began descending. The captain announced they would be making an unscheduled landing at Nashville International Airport due to a medical and security situation on board. Sharon stood frozen at the front, her face pale as reality set in. Jacob focused on preparing the cabin for landing, avoiding his colleague entirely. Colonel Brooks sent another message. Airline HQ directed plane to land in Nashville. Security personnel will meet aircraft. They know you're the victim. As they touched down in Nashville, airport security vehicles with flashing lights waited on the tarmac. The aircraft taxied to a remote stand, away from the main terminal. Within minutes, uniformed TSA and airport police boarded. They conferred briefly with the captain before approaching Malcolm's row. "You Malcolm Renaer?" the lead officer asked. "Yes," Malcolm replied calmly. With Patricia and other passengers corroborating his account, the officers took statements. 2 officers escorted a silent Sharon off the plane, her final glance at Malcolm a mixture of fury and fear. In a small interview room near the gate, Malcolm recounted the incident. Representatives from American Airlines arrived, offering profuse apologies and compensation. "It's not about free flights," Malcolm stated firmly. "It's about ensuring no passenger, no veteran, no person of any color, is ever treated with such disrespect." Word spread quickly across social media. By evening, headlines appeared. "Flight attendant pushes black veteran, plane grounded mid-flight." Hashtags like #RespectOurVeterans trended. Malcolm received messages of support from fellow veterans, and a disturbing note from Sharon's former co-worker. "She's done this before. There was an incident with a Hispanic passenger last year." The airline placed Sharon on immediate suspension pending termination. Their public statement emphasized zero tolerance for discrimination and assault. Meanwhile, airport police charged her with misdemeanor assault, with potential federal implications, since the incident occurred on an aircraft. Malcolm's advocacy work soared in the aftermath. The publicity brought new attention to his veterans' mental health initiatives. Donations poured in. Lawmakers eagerly arranged meetings. Months later, he was invited to speak at airline training seminars about respect and dignity. Sharon's trial resulted in a guilty plea, probation, and mandatory sensitivity training. For Malcolm, true victory wasn't in Sharon's downfall, but in the systemic changes that followed. New training protocols, improved complaint procedures, and heightened awareness meant other passengers would be spared similar experiences. As he prepared for another flight months later, Malcolm noticed a new airline billboard featuring a slogan about respect and inclusivity. He smiled, knowing his quiet dignity had spoken volumes. One phone call had grounded a plane. One man's composure had changed an entire system. And somewhere in America, another flight took off, with passengers of all backgrounds treated with the respect they deserved. His drill instructor's words echoed in his mind. "Maintain bearing. Always maintain bearing." In that moment of crisis, Malcolm had done exactly that. And justice had followed. The real power wasn't in shouting or violence. It was in knowing when to stand firm, when to make that call, and when to let accountability take its course. Malcolm's quiet dignity changed more than one flight. 6 months after the incident, Sharon faced serious consequences. The criminal charges resulted in probation, community service, and a permanent ban from working in commercial aviation. The airline implemented mandatory anti-discrimination training for all staff, with Malcolm himself invited as a consultant. What began as one man's stand against injustice transformed into a nationwide conversation about respect, dignity, and accountability. Veterans organizations cited Malcolm's case in successfully lobbying for improved protections against discrimination. When asked if he regretted making that single, powerful phone call, Malcolm smiled. "Justice doesn't always need a raised voice," he said. "Sometimes it just needs someone willing to stand their ground." Malcolm Renaer never sought fame or revenge. He simply refused to let injustice fly. His story reminds us that true power lies not in aggression, but in composed resistance against those who abuse their authority. In a world that often rewards the loudest voices, Malcolm showed us the deafening impact of dignified silence. What injustice would you stand against, even if you stood alone? Share your thoughts in the comments. For more stories of ordinary people creating extraordinary change, subscribe to Narrative Tales, because the most powerful stories aren't fiction. They're happening all around us.